All of your altcoins are bleeding against Bitcoin. Moody's just downgraded USA, and we have a private key law about to take effect. This is Around the Blockchain. Thank you for joining. Please hit that like button. We have some great guests on today. We're going to get right into it. We have TJ Shed on the top left. TJ, are Tuesdays for TJ?
Yeah, I guess so at this point. Thanks for having me on. Really enjoyed doing this show. Looking to have a good time.
Hey, I know we will. And then also we have Caleb Franzen. His name's blue. His glasses are blue. The markets are up. Are you feeling blue?
No, we're feeling green, baby. We're feeling green.
Feeling good. I love to see it. And feeling green with the green behind him in the scene. It is Sin City Crypto. Sin City Crypto, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic. I am super excited to be here. Thank you so much for, oh my God.
Oh, well, Rob appeared. All right. Love to see it. And then we have Jayson.
Always trying to steal the spotlight, man.
Always as we cut the camera away from you. And then we have Jayson Casper. Jayson, did you happen to catch that recent pump from 19?
I did. It was pretty juicy. Thanks for having me on the show.
It is always juicy, always a good time when you're on. And let's just get right into it. We have all the altcoins bleeding against Bitcoin. I wanted to share this chart, and we can't really look at the 24-hour chart to, indicate this, but if we look at the 7-day, it is going to tell the story. You see Bitcoin up 10%, but then you're going to be very hard-pressed to find an altcoin that can match that. In fact, almost none of them. You look 3%, 7%. When we finally see a double-digit pump, we scroll over, oh, it's wrapped Bitcoin. So really nothing is gaining, just like Bitcoin is at the moment, except for OKB. I don't know what's going on with that exchange token. But TJ, we've talked about alts bleeding into Bitcoin. I know Benjamin Cowan, he's always talking about this. We've seen some targets. What do you expect when everything pumps and then Bitcoin just outperforms? Is there a little bit of a laggard for alts? I mean, I know sometimes ETH might pump a month later. Does that narrative still hold water, or are we maybe matured beyond those points?
Yeah, I think it definitely does hold true at this point. I mean, this part of the cycle, generally speaking, is when we see Bitcoin dominance climb. I don't think we're going to see Bitcoin dominance get to some of the levels we've seen in the past. I mean, in the past, it's gotten well over 50%, 55%, even pushed up towards 60%, maybe like 58%. I don't think we'll get that high, mostly because of the existence of so much market cap in stable coins today. But when it comes to a lot of other altcoins outside of Ethereum and anything outside of the top 20, generally, in this part of the cycle, if you were around 2015, 2019, that sort of stuff, which again, back in 2015, there wasn't nearly as many altcoins to bleed against Bitcoin. But really 2019, after the ICO craze in 2017, 2018, we saw, Bitcoin dominance run away, and you definitely wanted to be in Bitcoin. I'm pretty heavy in Bitcoin and Ethereum right now. There are some, I would say, niche narrative type projects and coins that can outperform on a swing trade type basis. But realistically, for the majority of this year, depending on what kind of capital you're working with, I would say keep the majority of it in Bitcoin and Ethereum. I think Ethereum is going to do well going into the next cycle. But I'm not shocked at all to see Bitcoin leading the way through this type of this part of the cycle, as well as when there's fear involved. People want to feel confident, and I think the thing that still gives people the most confidence and the most trust, because it doesn't require trust, is Bitcoin, in my opinion. So, happy to see it bumping.
Really, really good job. You explaining the what, you're even explaining the when. Now, Caleb, I want to ask you the why. Why are some of these coins left in the dust when Bitcoin begins to pump?
This is essentially what we're experiencing right now is a financial market, not a financial market, but a financials crash, right? So all the banks, all the regional banks are being sold off. And so I even did a tweet about this on Monday morning saying that I expect, so long as this continues to be a bank-specific sell-off, that the Dow Jones is going to underperform the S&P 500, and the S&P 500 is going to underperform the NASDAQ, because the Dow is going to have the most financials exposure, then followed by the S&P 500, and then the NASDAQ is basically going to have no financials exposure, right? And so Bitcoin was essentially birthed out of the great financial crisis because Satoshi was trying to create an alternative monetary network that was absent of fiat corruption. And so as there's this whole concern about what's happening with deposits, is there going to be a big bank run? How systemic is this risk? What is the Fed's new BTFP facility? There's all these questions that so many people don't understand. And the one thing that we all do understand with certainty is what Bitcoin's future supply is, right? No one can tell me what Ethereum's future monetary policy is. No one can tell me what Atom's future monetary policy is. This is a Bitcoin narrative moment right now. And so, it's not necessarily due to the lack of, engineering or design in these other altcoins. It's simply that this is just Bitcoin's moment, as it has been for most of 2023.
All right, and you had a really good phrase there, fiat corruption. I'm going to steal that one, and I might even use it next time they ask me for a tip when I'm just trying to buy a Fiji water bottle at the airport. Now, Sin City Crypto, I know you guys over at your channel, you talk about the CME Gap. There was that CME Gap, 19K and some change, got filled very quickly, and then a very, very hard bounce. Well, we have a new CME Gap forming at 20,380. Is this a concern of yours? Do you think this is going to maybe play out again in the future and maybe even potentially take some profits off the table?
I mean, gaps, especially, in the traditional markets, gaps, I don't want to say with certainty, but typically they get filled. And so we saw the last CME Gap get filled with Bitcoin. Who's to say the next one isn't going to get filled? But you should look at that as an opportunity, right? Like, well, what I don't understand is people's conviction when Bitcoin's at 25, 26,000, and then their conviction wanes at 20,000. I've never understood that. And so I don't know if the gap fills, or if it goes down there, it gaps down and it fills, great. I'll DCA in at 20K. If it doesn't and it goes up to 30K, great. So at that point, I don't understand, but yeah.
And that's a good point. There's a gap to the bottom, to the downside, and then there's going to be a gap to the upside. Sometimes in the middle, you'll see the bulls and the bears really come out of the woodwork with their predictions there. Now, Jayson, we're talking about these alts bleeding against Bitcoin. I know you've been doing some trading lately. Are you looking at the BTC pairs when it comes to Ethereum and some of these other large-scale alts, and to see if they're maybe ready to have a move, not so much against fiat, but a move against Bitcoin?
Yeah, I do keep my eyes on the Bitcoin Ethereum chart specifically because I do believe that tends to give us like an indication that we are going to see altcoins move against Bitcoin. To be honest with you, DZ, I haven't really taken a look at it in the past few days. So,
all right, I'm actually going to ask you a question here. Is the BTC ETH, is that essentially the same as I would say maybe the basket of currencies? Is that the same as USD to DXY? Is there a similar analogy there? You can kind of see where the entire market is going. When you see the strength of the dollar, you can make a general assumption about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean,
you see the strength of
so
Ethereum.
right now the Bitcoin Ethereum, yeah, that's exactly how it is. Because when Ethereum starts to move against Bitcoin, a lot of other altcoins will start to move. So right now the Ethereum Bitcoin chart is in a giant cup and handle, basically from the last bull market, and it's currently in the handle. Right, it's consolidating in this channel. And when that channel breaks, then I think we're going to see altcoin season like in full effect. But I don't think this is going to happen until 2024, and it's probably by the time 2025 comes around, we're going to hit new all-time highs for Ethereum against Bitcoin. But for right now, we've just been ranging sideways, so there's not too much of an indication that we're going to see any kind of massive Ethereum move against Bitcoin.
All right, good. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on that as well. And I'm going to start thinking about the DXY to ETH analogy there. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to let that go. I feel like a puzzle just unlocked in my mind there slightly. All right, well, speaking of things being unlocked, maybe they're going to lock up your safe and you're going to need to get that unlocked because we just got downgraded by Moody's across the entirety of the U.S. banking sector. I'm going to read a quote from them. "We have changed to negative from stable our outlook on the U.S. banking system to reflect the rapid deterioration in the operating environment following deposit runs at SVB, Silvergate Bank, and Signature Bank, and the failures of those same entities." This is from Moody's itself. Now, Caleb, I'm gonna bring it to you first. Is this a lagging indicator? Because to me, it seems like, well, they should have said this a week ago. You should have gave me a warning. It's easy to see after the balloon pops to say, hey, I think the tensile strength of that rubber is no good.
Yeah, Wall Street's usually a step behind on their upgrades, downgrades, and initiations, right? So, I mean, look, last week, I think Moody's had a credit rating of an A on Silicon Valley Bank, which is, off the top of my head, investment grade, right? So,
yeah,
clearly that didn't work out too well. And so, the banks are always going to be, behind the curve on making these kinds of assessments. The credit ratings and the agencies will as well. I mean, look at the credit agencies going into the great financial crisis and the housing bubble, right? I mean, there's clear corruption in how these agencies conduct their ratings. Not that I have any insight on this in particular. It's pretty, kind of well-known knowledge. I think the thing that all of us should be recognizing here is this analogy that I proposed back in November, which is the earthquake effect. And so when we have the earthquake effect essentially can be boiled down to this, right? If in coastal geographies, when you get an earthquake, usually after that earthquake, you get a massive receding of the ocean water followed by a big tsunami, right? And so tying that analogy back into the macroeconomic environment, into the financial system, is that historic inflation was that earthquake, right? And so the response, the tectonic plate displacement, is the Fed tightening cycle, all the monetary policy, all the balance sheet reduction. And now what we're starting to see is all that liquidity is getting pulled out of the market over the last 12 months. We have to remember the Fed just started raising rates 12 months ago when they did their first 0.25% rate hike. And so all of a sudden we're seeing all these naked swimmers getting exposed. And so in November, when I wrote about this, I was talking about how at that point, all of the victims, all of the naked swimmers, all of the casualties were contained within the crypto industry. And what I wrote in my 2023 outlook is, what happens if we start to see those failures arise in the traditional banking system? Guys, this is, there's no secret why, my iPad background is literally the panic of 1907, right? And I've had that since June of last year. So this was not necessarily a surprise in and of itself. And I certainly wouldn't be, surprised to see more failures arise in the coming months.
All right, great stuff there, Caleb. You're always an all-star. I'm gonna start calling you young Charlie Munger. Just don't turn on us in your 90s, please. We can't take it.
No way.
All right, well,
no way.
TJ, who do you think this outlook is for? I mean, he's saying this, all the banks are bad. I'm wondering, who does this care? Like, who cares about this? Is this maybe, do you see even maybe foreign exchanges, are they other countries going to hold less dollars from this? I mean, what is the real outcome from this downgrade, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think he said it pretty well there. I mean, there's a lot of corruption that goes on with this. Like he said, we saw it with the last financial collapse. I mean, everything was rated extremely high, AAA, until it all collapsed. And I think the same thing happened here today. Everything, great ratings, great ratings. Oh, actually, in reality, our job to do our due diligence and check all of this stuff, we didn't do because we're just following the status quo. We're doing what we're told. So I don't put a ton of stock into it. I think this has a lot more to do with politics and posturing, which we know a lot of these things do. Even the CPI numbers, they'll change those. I was reading something today, like the numbers they're putting out there now, they stopped going back 2 years. Now they're only going back 1 year, compared to how they used to do it. So I feel like these rating things are very similar. They use them to push their narratives. Obviously, they know there's fear in the markets right now. Not downgrading them would be, I think, kind of a slap in the face to all the investors that do put stock in this stuff. I mean, it's very clear after the fact that it was, there's tons of risk involved with these banks. The entire system from the ground up, it was said here on this show before, it's fictional reserve banking. There's such a lack of liquidity in the system, it's not even funny. So if people wanted to pull their capital out, if they wanted to make withdrawals, it would all come collapsing down very quickly unless they got back on the printer to give that emergency liquidity like we saw them do in 2020 and 2021. They kicked the can down the road. Obviously, it didn't last very much longer, and they tried to tighten, like Caleb mentioned, only 12 months ago, and just only 12 months after tightening, we're already seeing the cracks in the system. And I think it's pretty undeniable at this point. So, yeah, I mean, I don't put a lot of stock in the Moody rankings myself, but, that's why I'm a Bitcoiner. I'm prepared for this, and I'm not surprised to see the traditional financial system struggling. This is why Bitcoin was born out of the past previous financial collapses. We know there's going to be future financial collapses when it's based on fiat currency. He said it very well. It's all about monetary policy. It's all about knowing what to expect and making decisions based on what you know. We know a lot when it comes to Bitcoin and the emission rate and what to expect over the next 100 years of Bitcoin. We know very little when it comes to know what to expect with the US dollar and all other fiat currencies out there. We can speculate all we want. That's what we do. That's the job that we're in. But at the end of the day, it's up to the whims and the decisions of a handful of people, and what their motives are and why they do what they do is very opaque, I would say, to the average retail consumer.
I would say George Orwell kind of summed up their actions quite well. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. That, of course, is from 1984. Sin City, Moody's is downgrading us. We got DZ quoting George Orwell. I'm feeling scared, says the viewer at home who just hit that like button, and we appreciate it. What is the move at this point? I mean, is it just Bitcoin, brass, and gold? I mean, what can they do to weather this economic uncertainty over the next couple of years?
So a couple of things TJ and Caleb said. TJ mentioned Moody's back in '08. They actually got fined close to $1 billion for their BS ratings. And so we all know these companies are corrupt, right? I cut you a check for half $500 million. Give me a good rating so people buy my stock, and what else? So I don't put any emphasis on what Moody's rates or anything like that. And TJ, you know damn well what they're going to do with fiat currency. They're going to debase it to death. And so I know we're speculating, but that's what's going to happen. But here is so you need a bank account for certain things, right? Like crypto isn't mainstream yet. Bitcoin isn't, you can't pay your mortgage with Bitcoin, right? You need a bank. And so we're seeing a lot of this. Citigroup and JP Morgan Chase came out and said they're having a hard time keeping up with the massive flow of deposits at their bank. Because if the federal government turn the money printer on for a number 16 bank, you don't think they're going to do that plus more for the 1, 2, 3, 4, number 5 banks in the entire country, which is JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. So now the wrong thing to do, in my opinion, would be to store a lot of your wealth there. I think that's a bad move. I would personally wouldn't feel comfortable doing anything up to what the FDIC insured, just in case. And my theory is now they're bailing out these banks, but once a CBDC comes along, which essentially means everyone who has a CBDC account is going to have an account directly with the Fed, then at that point they can look at if JP Morgan's failing and say, we're not bailing you out. And what's that going to, that's going to cause people to run to CBDCs. But one thing I would keep in mind when it comes to our crypto space in your portfolios, with the failure of Silicon Valley Bank and seeing as over 50% of all checks cut from VCs to crypto projects, where from that bank, take a hard look at your altcoin portfolio, which altcoins needed to raise money over the last year. How many times have they raised money post ICO or post seed funding? And like an example is Uniswap. Uniswap just raised $165 million just 5 months ago. And so if that liquidity for them is not there or much harder to get, that's what I would be focusing on looking at. And I think that's part of the reason we're seeing people flock to Bitcoin, not only with the banking and how Bitcoin is a hard asset, but the fact that we know Bitcoin is the most self-sustaining cryptocurrency token out. Doesn't need VC funding. It doesn't need injection of capital. It just does it. And so I can't say the same about the other altcoins. So that would be my advice to people watching. Look at your altcoin portfolio, do some research, spend some time, and you save yourself some money.
Yeah, it reminds me of that bad description. You say, what is the definition of, or what is Bitcoin? You just say, well, it just is. And so, I mean, sometimes that is enough. Well, Jayson, I want to ask you this question in that line of thought, because you're maybe the most self-sufficient person on the panel today. If Moody's was correct and the entire financial sector was just thrown in disarray and you needed a wagon full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread, it is that bad. What are you going to do when it comes to, say you had to purchase something? Now, I don't think it's any secret you are a farmer. Are you more likely to barter with, say, a gallon of milk or maybe some, brass little things that are shaped like this? Are you more likely to use gold that you maybe shave and you're weighing out micrograms? Or are you more likely to trade in Bitcoin in this proverbial future here?
Right. Well, I think it should be everybody's goal to be as self-sufficient as possible in life, because the more self-sufficient you are, the less of a slave you are, right? Because if you can't produce your own food, then you're a slave to whoever gives you food. And I just think it's so important when people think about investing in assets that are going to increase in value over time or could be used to get them things that they need in the future, that they focus on just being a producer to the largest extent that they possibly can. So this means doing things like creating businesses, starting a business, whatever you're good at, whatever you can do to provide value for other people. You need to start doing that, and you need to start monetizing that. And then you need to also start taking that money, because businesses are assets. They generate income. And even if the income is in fiat currency that's starting to hyperinflate, you can use that to invest in things like Bitcoin, which is a whole nother system that works outside the fiat system. And then you could basically, we can create these little local economies where people can, let's say we are using Bitcoin or we are using food to to barter, right? If you can grow potatoes in your front lawn, you know, you can't really eat Bitcoin, but I'm sure you would take I would take someone's Bitcoin if they wanted to buy my potatoes, if they wanted to buy my eggs. So I really think the focus should be on becoming a producer to the largest extent that you are able to do so. That's how I think, especially if we do this in localized groups and in local communities, and everybody kind of knows each other and knows what everybody's good at. If you know, like somebody who's a doctor, maybe they can say, hey, look, I'm not down with where things are going. I'm going to start accepting Bitcoin or even bartering with potatoes. And me as a farmer, I might, you know, next time I have a sore throat, I might go to the doctor with a wheelbarrow full of eggs and potatoes, you know, and they might just give me some kind of who knows what.
All right, I'm looking forward to Bitcoin 2028, and you're there with a chuck wagon full of potatoes, gallons of milk, unpasteurized, of course. That is going to be. Just real quick, Jason. I'm sure there's a lot of people wondering, what is the best first step to becoming self-sufficient, or just a good resource?
The best first step to becoming self-sufficient, I would say, start a business and grow your own food. And if you're trying to grow your own food, the best place to start is potatoes. If you have grass, you should be growing potatoes. I can't believe people spend money on keeping their lawn green when they could be actually growing food.
I'm literally getting bullish on growing my own potatoes. I kid you not. All right. I'm going to look into that. And how long does a potato last? I'm sure you know.
All year, man. I've still got potatoes I harvested in July. They're sitting right over here in the root cellar.
I'm coming over for twice baked spuds, Jason. So make me a plate. For sure. All right. Well, let's move on here and talk about the private key law happening in Wyoming. We had touched on this, I think, about 2 months ago. Now I think it's made it to the next step, and where the governor actually signed the bill. We were speculating back then. We weren't sure how close it was going to make it or if it would cross the finish line. Seemingly is crossing the finish line. They signed this bill preventing a forced disclosure of your private keys. You no longer have to say you lost it on a boating accident. This is the latest move from those Wyoming lawmakers to help protect privacy. Quote, no person shall be compelled to produce a private key or make a private key known to any other person in any civil, criminal, administrative, legislative, or any other proceedings. But there is a little caveat. It says they can ask for it in lawful proceedings. Now, Caleb, I call you young Charlie, so now I'm going to see if you're a young David Sachs, a young lawyer here as well. What do you think they mean by lawful proceedings? I mean, is this like, hey, we know it's there, we need your taxes, here's a lawful order saying we need your crypto, or is this, you know, maybe something different? What did you read into that just cryptically worded sentence?
Yeah, maybe it has something to do with an IRS audit into, you know, your federal or state taxes. It could have something to do with maybe an ongoing trial if you were being tried of being guilty of something. I have no idea, right? This is awesome, though, for the state of Wyoming. It's a great step in the right direction. Wyoming notoriously has, you know, very great laws and protections, both for businesses and individuals. There's a reason why I set up my LLC there. So, you know, this is, I think, just a continuation of Wyoming's kind of push for individual and business privacy from that aspect. And I think it's Senator Loomis, right? She's the one who probably signed this in. I know she's a very big Bitcoin proponent. So we'll likely see more of this going forward.
All right. And good job. Shout out to Cynthia. We're big fans over here. Now, TJ, yay or nay, is this going to lead to federal clarity? Can we expect the Biden administration, hey, Joe's going to come out and say, hey, here's our private key law. Congress, please sign.
I don't think immediately, but you got to start somewhere. And I think starting on the state level makes the most sense when it comes to regulating this stuff. I agree. Wyoming, one of the best places for it. Cynthia Lummis, like Caleb was just saying, great proponent of Bitcoin. Wyoming in general, great proponent of privacy and a great place to own property, run a business, all that sort of stuff. They're definitely setting the right tone and the right standard when it comes to how to regulate this stuff. and then you would hope it spreads to other states. You know, maybe if we could see a state like Florida pick up some of this stuff. We know they're heavy into Bitcoin. You know, Colorado's kind of right in there. They're kind of in the middle on a lot of this sort of stuff. But if we could see the trends start to translate over many other states, then potentially it could float up to a federal level. But I don't see them make, you know, like, look, they can't even figure out how to regulate a freaking stable coin right now. They're definitely not about to say, like, okay, you guys can all keep your private keys and we're not going to come ask you questions. If there's anything the federal government loves to do, it's get as much information out of you as possible, whenever possible, to use against you whenever they need to, or, you know, protect you, as they say. But they're gonna use it for their own purposes. I did want to mention one more thing on what Jayson was saying. Loved what he said about being self-sufficient and growing things, bartering things, all that sort of stuff. Because we get asked this a lot too, like, hey, if you can't buy Bitcoin or gold or real estate, you know, like, what's some other things you can do to kind of combat hyperinflation? And obviously produce, basically what he was saying, being a producer, producing goods that you can sell. So another way to say that is cash flow. If you can manage your cash flow situation or build businesses that create a positive cash flow, then when inflation comes in, you're getting more of that cash to then, you know, direct towards different goods and assets as you need. So the more you can own your own business, and again, you can start small, because a lot of people obviously that are watching this channel, you're not able necessarily to go out and start a farm on the whim. You could probably grow potatoes in your yard. You could also probably do a weekend warrior type job, you know, repairing fences, or, hey, if you're more tech savvy, repairing cell phones, computer repair, doing little things that help you get cash flow positive. And then you can take that extra cash flow and put it into something that doesn't depreciate or inflate as fast as the currency you're in right now. So I just wanted to throw that in there because that comes up a lot on Blockchain Basement show that we do, of like, hey, I'm barely getting by right now. I can't put a lot of money into Bitcoin. I maybe put $25, $30 a week, but what are some other things we can do? You know, side hustles are going to become more and more and more important to get you in a cash flow positive situation, to where, you know, then all of a sudden that side hustle becomes, you know, a part-time job, becomes a full-time job. Then you can quit your regular 9-to-5 job, and then you really start taking steps towards that path to freedom, which I really love what he said. I mean, as long as you're, you know, working for somebody else and selling, you know, renting out your time, it's going to be very difficult to achieve, you know, freedom, sovereignty, self-reliance, whatever you want to call it. You know, and that's the opposite of what the federal government wants you to do. They want you to continue to produce more and work more for less and less return on your time. And that's why Bitcoin puts time on your side.
And like Kiyosaki says, Robert Kiyosaki, have your money make money while you sleep. And that's, you know, a good way to put it as well. Now, Sin City Crypto, I'm sure you agree with me. My knee-jerk reaction when I hear politicians getting involved with cryptos, I just immediately distrust it. I feel like there's some chicanery going on here. Do you trust it coming out of Wyoming, though? It is one of the more crypto-friendly. What are your take? Are you good passing them the ball here?
I definitely trust the government for sure. I mean, look at what they've done to protect us. I'm being sarcastic, of course. Look, this has zero chance of being approved on a federal level. That's like saying, hey, we don't need to see your bank account. We don't need to know about your bank account. Like I forget if it was Caleb or TJ said, they want to know everything about your life. Everything. Your text messages. There's a camera at every single intersection, right? Like, they know, they want to know what you have, where you're moving your money to, where you're going, what you're typing, what you're searching, where, like, they want to know everything. And so if this became federal law, no one would use, like, I would just take a ledger and I would convert every US dollar into a freaking stable coin and put it on the ledger, and they can't come after it. Like, so I think it has zero chance of happening on a federal level. Maybe that narrative changes in the future, but in the meantime, I don't think there's any chance at all. If that's the case, then everyone would just hide their money. Like, you take me to court, you can't do anything. You can't take my private keys. But this reminds me of a story. A cop pulled someone over. I think it was in Nevada or Vegas, and they had their body cam, and the cop was going through the guy's stuff, and one of the pieces of paper had the guy's private key. Right? You guys remember that?
Yeah, he was rifling through his wallet contents, and it was in his wallet.
Yeah. And it was on camera. And so, like, yeah, to that extent, sure. But when it comes to, like, going to court and law, if you're being sued for, I don't know, child support or something, hell no, they're not going to protect your private keys. Like, they're fighting so hard to kill crypto now. Why would they let us hide our money via a hardware wallet and a private key? So I don't think it has any chance of happening on a federal level. But we all know Wyoming is very, very crypto friendly. but they're just a small voice in the grand scheme of crypto haters at the White House.
All right. So in the meantime, maybe the boat trips are going to keep happening. And hey, if we hit some wakes,
for
you
sure.
know, something happens. You know, it'll happen. All right, Jayson. I'm looking at, you know, that kind of example. He just cited child support, alimony. I mean, are there any reasons where there is a reasonable explanation why we might want someone's keys, maybe a criminal or something? What are your thoughts on, you know, incepting people's thoughts here and getting their keys?
Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose of being in crypto is that nobody else has your access to your private keys, right? I mean, that defeats the whole purpose of holding Bitcoin. I do think it's very interesting, though, especially as we move down the road of CBDCs and as we move down the road of connecting our brains to the internet, there's probably going to come a point where there literally is no privacy at all. So, but yeah, there is no reason why anybody should have access to private keys. Yeah, I know somebody might make a case. That's how they always, you know, the technological surveillance state creep always comes in because there's some kind of ethical or moral reason for it. Like, oh, it's going to help somebody or protect this poor victim from something, right? That's how it always starts. But no, the more privacy we can have, the better.
Man, you were painting a scary picture. I didn't even think about that, Jayson. Elon Musk, I'm sure there's an engineer somewhere looking into that, where with Ring cameras, we have access, you know, from these employees. They're hacking into Alexa. They're listening to your children's bedroom. Why wouldn't that deep mind engineer say, Bitcoin, private, seed phrase, you know, see what neurons start firing up. Oh, I found some words. I'm going to start writing those things down. So, all right. Well, I now have a new fear about putting the chip in my brain. So thank you for that one, Jayson. And I think that is all we're going to have time for today. It was a really, really close episode, a really good one. And Caleb squeaked by with the win. Caleb, a.k.a. Young Charlie, Young Chuck, Young Munger, feel free. Leave us with some parting thoughts. I really do. I say that in jest, but I do feel like you're a young thought leader in this space. So take it away.
Appreciate you, DZ. Thanks for having me on. Great discussion today. I think we're all on the same page in so many ways. So that's amazing to see. If you're interested in reading more about the earthquake effect, read my free newsletter from this last Saturday. It's called A Tsunami Has Formed. That's cubicanalytics.substack.com. Get outside, touch some grass, go on a hike, eat a pizza. I'm in Croatia right now. I'll be here for the next month and a half. So the food has been delicious. Have a beer while you're at it. I can't speak now. So
all right, I think it was those beers. Guys. All right, you know what? We're feeling the earthquake right now. And if you're feeling that earthquake, hit that like button. Make sure you check out everyone's channel in the description. Links are below. And until next time, easy out.